Maneva na sema PENDREAM TV. PENDREAM TV de osia dem yopo.
Pratt has finally issued a response to the president and Afenyo Markins after the Sona address, which I would like you to join me listening to into detail. This station still remains PENDREAM TV, the only channel that brings you the best and latest updates in politics. If you are new here, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, like, and also share to other members to watch as well. Thank you.
Comment. There are more says, please, what's the MPP saying about one district, one factory? If it's party that lied to Ghanaians about it was able to do, that's the agenda 111 was able to do only 3. Like he's saying for 8 years, why is he looking for 10 from NDC? I don't think that project has been in existence for 8 years, about the second term of the Nana Akufo-Addo administration. If you just join us, we are having a discussion on the State of the Nation's address, the last one delivered by President Akufo-Addo. Let's listen to Comrade Kwesi Pratt, engineer.
Well, first of all, I'd like to do some capital clearing before I come to this very dramatic State of the Nation address. And the first thing I'd like to tackle is the framework within which the NDC and the MPP work and formulate policy. Now, clearly, the NPP has told us over and over again that their philosophy, the framework they use, is something called property owning democracy, which is extremely primitive. It's an extremely primitive form of capitalism. I mean, you know that capitalism has evolved over a period of time. And it is reforms which has led to modern capitalism. And modern capitalism really carries the title of social democracy. Social democracy is not socialism. It's a variant of capitalism. It's a development. But capitalism in its most primitive form is what is known as property owning democracy. And you might want to trace it back to the days where only those who owned landed property could vote in elections and participate in making decisions, about governance and so on. Now, if you take the history of political science, we are told, for example, that in ancient Greece, that was where democracy as we know it today started developing. But the Greek state had slaves. Slaves who had no rights whatsoever. And therefore the Greek state, in terms of today's definition, cannot qualify to be a democracy. Because society was stratified, along class lines. And not all the classes had rights and so on. So essentially, the National Democratic Congress has never claimed to be a socialist party. What it has claimed to be is that it's a social democratic party which is somehow or can somehow be seen as an advanced form of capitalism. So both the NDC and the MPP are capitalist parties. Excepting that one is very primitive and one has pretensions of modernity. You understand? So I think it's important to clear that. Now, having cleared that, there is something else that I think is important to clear. And it's this whole concept of development and how we achieve development. In this Fourth Republic, all the governments we have had exclude the mass of our people from the development process. So development is defined simply as borrowing money, usually huge amounts of money, by big men and women who constitute government, ministers and so on, get together and they borrow huge amounts of money. And then they bring in foreign contractors and consultants to do what they call development. So development is defined as overhead bridges, some roads, some hospitals, and so on. The people of Ghana are not involved in this process of development. They are not involved at all, at any level, in this process of development. Now, I'm hoping that one day we would have a concept of development which clearly implies the mobilization of our people to solve their own problem using their own resources. That, as far as I'm concerned, would be true development. So in terms of strategy, the two strategies look alike. The two strategies actually do not involve the mass mobilization of our people to resolve their own concrete problems of access to education, of improved health care, of better dietary conditions, and so on. And I hope that at some point this will change. Now, it's important to note that the State of the Nation address, as we saw yesterday, was so very full of drama. In fact, the dramatics dominated this address. And the first drama really has to do with the ADC of the president collapsing behind him. And it raises a number of important questions. First of all, it's important to find out what has happened to him. If he fell ill, has he recovered? And it's important to encourage his family and friends and so on, you know, to take very good care of him. He collapsed in the performance of his duty as an employee of the state. And I think that we should show a lot of sympathy for this gentleman who collapsed behind the president. Now, one of the questions which arises immediately is, his collapse, was it due to a known health condition? And if it was due to a known health condition, how come that he continued to function as an aide to the president and was deployed to stand behind the president, you know, for this address? Your standing behind the president is not just a show. It has so many implications. The role assigned to him also involved the protection of the president in case of an emergency. And if he had a known health condition, he could not have played that role, and his choice must be problematic, you understand? Now, if it was not a known health condition, is it that the health condition existed, but because of lack of examination, it didn't come up? And if that is the case, then there's another serious problem that we need to look at, and it's a security, you know, problem. Now, this guy was on camera, and he didn't collapse all of a sudden. The collapse started. I saw it. It took minutes before he hit the ground. Started shaking, you know, started drifting to the left and to the right and so on, before he eventually sank to the ground. Now, for those of us who were watching the address on camera or on television, we saw it happening. Now, my question is, didn't anybody else see this happening? Because if the president is speaking in such a forum, attention ought to be on him. Everything around him ought to be noticed and so on. How come that this guy was allowed to go through those processes and eventually collapse to the ground? Somebody must have failed in his duty, you know, and I think it's an important issue, you understand. The other thing that hit me, you know, was the president's own reaction. It was so very surprising, Because I expect that there ought to be a certain bond between the president and his aide-de-camp. In fact, his very life depends on his aide-de-camp. And I was surprised that when this gentleman fell to the ground, the president did not appear to care. He didn't appear to care at all. He didn't go to his aid. I mean, people beyond the president had to rush to assist this gentleman. And that is a huge betrayal of an attitude which is most surprising. Because even people we don't know, if they collapse in public, our reaction is different. Now there's an aide to the president who collapses to the ground, and the president does not lift a finger to help him. So I'm standing there, I'm watching television, and I'm saying, what is this? Isn't the president's general attitude to people around him? And indeed, if it is general attitude to people around him, then indeed it's a huge statement. Then indeed we must not be surprised at the performance of his administration. So this collapse of his ADC has become, emblematic, and so on. For many people, they may see it as a very small thing and so on, but for me it's not small. It betrays character. It shows us so many things about the president and his attitude to the people he works with and the people he's supposed to be working for. So for me, that was important. The show of the day, really, the show of the day, was the statement made by the deputy minority leader. That was the major statement of the day. And it gained more attention than the president's State of the Nation address, even though it lasted for only 3.5 minutes. I mean, the craftsmanship was excellent. You understand? The delivery was problematic. I mean, it was delivered in halting English. And please excuse me, I'm just being honest about it. The English was halting, It was not about the diction and so on, but you saw a certain lack of flow and so on. But in spite of that, it was a master speech. It had some mastery around it because it captured the moment and defined the State of the Nation address within 3.5 minutes to the admiration of even the outgoing president himself. And that was a really master speech. The State of the Nation address was supposed to give us an indication of what has happened to this state within the last 4 years. Some say 8 years, but I believe that essentially it's about the last 4 years, what has happened and what has not happened, and whether the government has done well or has not done well. The minority leader summed it all up and said the verdict of the people is already out there, and the verdict of the people is the results of the election. You can't go to an election and lose so massively and claim to have done so very well unless you are arrogant and disrespect the verdict of the people. Clear? You understand? The power presidents and governments exercise is power which belongs to the people. And ultimately, it is only the people who can make a determination as to whether governments have done well or have not done well. And that determination is made by exercising their vote. Their vote is the verdict. And the people of Ghana, their vote, their verdict simply was that this government has done so abysmally over the last 4 years. So very abysmally. I mean, count the number of seats that the New Patriotic Party has lost. And even the seats that it won, the margins were reduced. This is an incredible defeat. It's never happened in the so-called Fourth Republic. And I say the so-called Fourth Republic advisedly. Because the Republican status we achieved in 1960 has never changed. Ghana has only been one republic. There hasn't been any different republic. There's the Republican status of Ghana, which was attained in 1960, has never changed. So it's only one republic. But for the sake of those who like to dramatize, those who like to do all kinds of things, so let us accept that we are in a Fourth Republic. And for this Fourth Republic, no party, no government has suffered the kind of defeat that the New Patriotic Party suffered in this election. Of course, if you compare it to 1951, I mean, the 1951 defeat was certainly more massive than this one. I mean, the CPP and Kwame Nkrumah simply just swept the polls and reduced its opposition to just rubble, complete rubble. That was the most massive defeat that the ancestors of the New Patriotic Party suffered. But this is the second one. I mean, huge, such a huge defeat, and it's a clear verdict. Now, when I saw the president standing before Parliament, and obviously without any sense of remorse or regret, and telling us how so well his government has done and so on, I was wondering whether he really understood the results of the elections, whether the results of the elections had made any impact on him. Because if he were aware of the weight of the election outcome, he could not have been standing in front of us claiming to have done so very well. Because the verdict is clear, and the verdict is superior to his opinions about himself and so on. He was not humbled by this defeat, and that is a worry, for me. Now, we are supposed to be starting this discussion with the economy, and I intend to do just that. Now, here is the outgoing president standing in front of all of us and telling us about how much we have in our foreign reserves. And I'm wondering, so why did we go to the IMF to borrow 3 billion? If we have so much money to our credit, why did we have to go to the IMF, cap in hand, on our knees, crawling, to get $3 billion? I mean, unbelievable, incredible, because the two don't jive. We went to the IMF simply because we were broke. We couldn't meet our financial obligations. So that reserve is useless. The talk about that reserve, whether it exists or not, is useless. It is not enough to help us out of our crisis, and that is why we went to the IMF. We couldn't have gone to the IMF if we had so much riches, if we had so much in reserve, and so on. We could not have gone to the IMF. It wouldn't have made sense to go to the IMF. So simply going to the IMF to beg for a relief of $3 billion shows clearly that the president did not know what he was talking about. Clear. You don't need to do any other analysis and so on. Clearly, the president was lost. He did not understand what he was talking, about. Now, in discussing the economy, the president threw many figures at us. Many figures at us. And I've always said that any government which looks at statistical averages and bases its success and failure on statistical averages is lost. Because there's a way in which these statistical averages tell us nothing about the state of our people. Nothing. You see, the gross domestic product, what does it really mean in real terms? It's an aggregation. You understand? It's an aggregation. And if you strip it down, you may find that what goes into the determination of the gross domestic product may simply be foreign-owned interest and not Ghanaian. It all adds up. Per capita income. When they say that the per capita income has risen, what does it really mean? Because it's possible that only 2% of the population will get such a massive increase in incomes that it will distort the reality. When 98% have had a reduction in their incomes, 2% can get such massive increases in income that a certain figure will be thrown at us. So these statistical averages really do not help us much in determining where our people are with regards to the state of the national economy and so on. So I agree with Honorable Member of Parliament for Anas Sowutuom. I think he has a few days more to be Honorable Member of Parliament. Please accept my condolence. I really am sad about how you were handed out of office, simply by being principled. So you have my sympathies, you have my condolences. But you see, the point I'm making, and which is a point that you make very, very well, and is a principle which we might describe as the Kufuor principle. And the Kufuor principle is that in talking about the economy and so on, forget GDP, forget per capita income, forget gross national income and so on, and simply put your hand in your pocket. You understand? When you put your hand in your pocket, you can determine the state of the economy in your own pocket. When you go to the market, and one piece of okra is selling for 10 cedis, you know the state of the economy. If you're a taxi driver, and you can't meet your daily sales and have to go to Shylock to borrow money to meet your daily sales, you know the state of the economy. If you're a pensioner who provided adequately for your pension period, for your health care and so on, and today you are sick and you cannot afford your medicines because of a haircut imposed by government, you know the state of the economy. You understand? If you saved in any of the Ghanaian banks, which had collapsed, and your money is lost and so on, you know the state of the economy. So the people know the state of the economy, they understand the state of the economy very, very clearly, perhaps better than people in government and so on. Now, one of the things that shocked me a great deal was the president's claim that at the time he took office, the energy sector had an accumulated debt of $2.5 billion at the time he took office. And that the projection was that if the trend continues, things will get worse in 14 years and so on. And that by the miracle that he had performed and so on, at the end of his tenure, the energy sector debt was still at $2.5 billion, and that this was an achievement. My goodness, Jesus Christ of Nazareth. Achievement? The debt, according to him, he says that the debt was $2.5 billion, has not reduced by 1 cent. Master, has not been reduced by 1 cent. And for him, it was an achievement. My goodness, I couldn't believe it. But that's the sense of achievement. Keeping things as they are, sense of achievement. So if we were to retrogress, what would it be like? Unbelievable. But be that as it may, he then comes up and tells us that, look, I'm leaving office when the lights are on. When I came into office, the lights were off. But is that true? All of us know that that is not true. He came into office at the time when the lights were on. And he's actually leaving office at the time when the lights are flicking. Dumso is back with us. It may not be on the same scale as happened some time ago, but it is with us. In fact, one of the independent power producers had to stop production because of the state of indebtedness to the independent power producers. And given the fact that the independent power producers, not the whole power sector, just the independent power producers are owed $2.5 billion. If the incoming administration does not do some magic, and I don't know what magic they are going to do, to deal with this debt, my goodness, we are in it. We are going to get a major power crisis, which will not be the results of the inefficiency of the incoming administration. It will be a legacy of inefficiency from the current administration. And I think that we have to understand that very clearly. It is likely that we will get into very serious doomso very soon, likely. The only reason why we are not there yet is that this administration is doing everything possible to keep the lights on somehow, so that they can shift the blame to the next administration. That's the only reason. So I would not be surprised if in the months ahead of us we enter into doomso. Indeed, in the Kufuor administration, we had a power crisis. And many people blame the Kufuor administration, and justly blame the Kufuor administration, for the power crisis. Of course, I was angry at the time because we're not being given a scientific solution to the problem. We're asking these charlatans in Kasok and so on to go and stand on the Volta River and pray to God to make rain fall into the river and so on. It was so annoying. We went and bought what Reku Brobe described as toy generators and so on. So the approach was so very annoying. But the crisis had not been caused by the Kufuor government, okay? Because from 1966, we had stopped the expansion of the power sector. Indeed, it was only a champion who came and added the Pong hydroelectric project. The Bui Dam, for which engineers were on site by 1966, was stopped. The mini hydro projects, which was envisioned by Nkrumah, was stopped, and so on. So there was a huge gap, and so on. And Kufuor became a victim of a very bad history of neglect of the energy sector, And I remember those days, Nana Asante Bedietu, who today is the executive secretary to the president, his father was the chairman of the Energy Commission. And indeed, I was invited to interview his father by Nana Asante Bedietu, to throw more light on why we had this energy crisis. And his father made it very clear that it was because of the bad policies of the National Liberation Council and the Progress Party government which brought us here. You understand? Why? When they assumed power, they brought some expert from the UK who came and told us that there was no need to expand energy generation because we had enough from the Akosombo project. And that is why we stopped the nuclear power generation project, which was in the 7-year development plan. And that is why we stopped the mini hydro project, which was in the 7-year development plan. That is why we stopped pursuing green energy and so on. And the cumulative effect of all this neglect brought us to the crisis that the Kufuor administration faced. It is possible that the Mahama administration is going to face a new crisis in the power sector. But that would not be the fault of the Mahama administration. It would be the cumulative effect of past neglect. It would be the cumulative effect of the piling of debt in the energy sector. But you see, let me make this point very clear. And this morning I was having a chat with my brother here about the future of this country. And both of us agree that a failure of the Mahama administration will have very dire consequences for the democratic experiment. If the Mahama administration is not able to deliver, it is democracy, the bourgeois limited democracy we have, which will be in danger. Because after Mahama, how can we convince the people of Ghana that this democracy works? 1992, they went to the polling stations, they voted in a government, they suffered all kinds of things to get an election going. What did the people of this country get out of that election? 1996, we repeated the same thing. What did we get out of it? And so on and so on and so on. So many elections with very little to show. You understand? Now, if you look at the outcome of this last election, the overwhelming endorsement of President Mahama and so on, it's a huge statement. President John Dramani Mahama cannot afford to fail. He cannot. Even if he wants to fail, he must not be allowed to fail, because the consequences will be for all of us. The Mahama administration has to succeed by any means possible and legitimate. It has to succeed. Because if it doesn't succeed, the agenda for resetting will kick in. And that agenda for resetting would not necessarily follow these bourgeois democratic lines. We may have a revolution on our hands. We may have a coup d'etat on our hands. The options are scary. And that is why it is important for the Mahama administration to succeed. And that is why, even though the energy crisis will not be the creation of the Mahama administration, the Mahama administration has to find every way and any way to resolve it so that it doesn't become a crisis. Because without the supply of reliable energy, this whole talk about 24-hour economy is useless. Master, it will be useless. How can you have a 24-hour economy when you don't have lights? So dealing with this energy crisis is absolutely important, and it is one area where there ought to be a concentration, of minds, of energy, and so on, of mass mobilization and so on. We need to find a solution as Ghanaian people to these hydra-headed, problems and so on. Now, the NDC has promised to do something in the first 120 days of its administration. And if I'm not mistaken, it includes a national dialogue on how to deal with the economy. I do hope that it will be a true national dialogue and not anything which is contrived. It has to be a true national dialogue. And the outcome ought to be different from all those dialogues we have seen in the past. Because those dialogues we have seen in the past ended up with us crawling before the IMF and the World Bank. We have been there 18 times already. We haven't seen any progress. Going there the 19th time will be simply insane. Because the solution to economic problems and so on does not come from there. You understand? One of the problems we want to solve as Ghanaians is the unemployment problem. But anytime you go to the IMF and the World Bank, what solution do they give you? Don't employ people, freeze employment in the public sector. How do you solve the unemployment problem by freezing employment? It doesn't make sense. So our leaders should stop wasting our time trooping into the IMF and the World Bank anytime there's a crisis here and begging on their bellies, crawling on their bellies for solution, because it doesn't work. And I don't see either renegotiation with the IMF or whatever as a solution to the concrete problem that confronts the Ghanaian economy. We must think outside the box. We must do something new. We must learn from the alliance of Sahel states. Please learn something from them. Niger, before the coup d'etat, was classified as one of the 3 poorest countries in the world. In a matter of 1 year, Niger has become the fastest growing economy in the world. What did they do? Learn from it. Don't behave like Nana Akufo-Addo, who is going for French assistance to go and topple Chiani in Niger. Don't behave like Nana Akufo-Addo. Be wise. Learn from them. What did they do to become the fastest growing economy in the world? And all they did is to take control of their uranium resources and other resources. Change the dynamics around it so that they can earn more from the same resources, from the exploitation of the same resources. We can do that here. Can you imagine that today Ghana is the leading producer of gold in Africa? The leading producer of gold in Africa. I think the 5th in the world and so on. And we don't have a gold marketing mechanism in our country. Our gold is marketed from outside our country. It's crazy. It doesn't make sense. Let's learn from Botswana. You know how just establishing a diamond marketing infrastructure in Botswana has changed the Botswana economy. Because the traders come, they bring money into your country, they stay in hotels, they eat in your country, they hire vehicles in your country and so on. They do so many other things that stimulate economic growth. So let's sell our gold in Ghana. Let's get what they call the Usel3ss stamp. You know what the Usel3ss stamp is? The stamp of authority, the stamp which verifies the standards of your gold and so on. Let's get an Usel3ss stamp. Let's establish a marketing mechanism in Ghana for our gold. That alone will bring tremendous changes in the economy. Why? A lot of Ghanaian gold ends up in Dubai and is turned into jewelry. What jewelry? Bracelets and earrings and so on. The local Ghanaian blacksmith. Why is the local Ghanaian blacksmith or the goldsmith in the chain of production? This is not rocket science. This is just common sense. You don't have to go to school. You don't have to go to Kenufurata school to know this. As a matter of fact, those who go to Kenufurata school don't know this. You understand? So let's develop a thriving industry based on the manufacture of things that Dubai has taken the lead in. We are better placed to produce gold ornaments than Dubai. Let's begin it now. It doesn't take rocket science to do it. It doesn't take any huge investment to do it. Let's do it now, and it will add, to our economic prosperity and so on. We can do it. Let's do it. In fact, free SHS. That's one topic which simply just makes me sick. Sick. First of all, the lies about it. Look, the idea of free education is not novel. It's not an NPP idea. That idea came after independence, immediately after independence. The government had a program of making all facets of education free and compulsory and so on. The Nkrumah government. Look at the accelerated development when the Nkrumah government established the Ghana Education Trust under Kojobo Tio and so on. So That is a history, it's not new. Indeed, it was the Buzia government who came and put brakes on the free education program of the Convention People's Party, leading to his being harassed on the University of Ghana campus by Professor Ibo Hatchful. If you remember, Professor Ibo Hatchful, then a young lecturer at the University of Ghana, was actually arrested for confronting Buzia and telling Buzia that instead of stopping free education, he should have come to the campus in a VW car rather than in that opulent, extravagant display of convoys and so on. And he was arrested. I was a young boy then. I can remember this battle over free education. So free education is not an original idea from Akufo-Addo or the NPP. Even in this so-called Fourth Republican dispensation, the very first political party which promised to introduce free SHS, free education, was the Convention People's Party. Okay? The political party, the first political party that showed any seriousness towards it, was Dr. Indom's PPP. They actually came up with cost. They had costed it. They showed how they were going to mobilize resources to finance it and so on. You understand? Why? The NDC under Mills started implementing aspects which they believed would lead to free education. In any case, free education is a constitutional injunction. Read the Constitution, the 1992 Constitution is there. Progressively free education and so on.
But you must appreciate what I meant to say is that...
I'm not reacting to you, but go on. Yeah, but go on.
I said that the Nana Akufo-Addo's era, you know, he projected the need for education, and I was commending the administration for that. So, I mean, and as today you're even talking about it being a topic of discussion as part of our country's development is even, I mean, for me, I'm happy about that. If we're in a country where even education is not discussed, then it will not make it into policy for it to be implemented. So, you know, in as much as many have been done before Nana Akufo-Addo's time, whether money for value or not, the quantum of monies that were assigned to free SHS quite huge. Quite huge.
Honorable member.
No, I said whether money for value or value for money. How does it go?
Value for money. No matter how. But honorable member of parliament, I'm really wondering why you have dragged yourself into this, because it's totally unnecessary.
Carry on.
First of all, I know that you know that this is not the first time in our lives that educational policy is being debated as a public issue.
Agreed.
And you cannot make that statement.
Agreed.
I recall even in the Kufuor era and in the Mills era, there was a huge discussion about the content of education, whether to make it 3 years or 4 years. Correct. And so on.
Correct.
I remember in 1969, the arguments about free education and how Buzia insisted that we could not have free education and so on. So it is not true that this is the first time that this debate has been intensified or has come about and so on. It cannot be true. You know it.
It would always be there.
So why do you do this to yourself?
It would always be there.
Don't do this to yourself. You are a very fine man. You are a very fine man and keep your reputation. Don't harm it with these interjections. You understand? But you see, be that as it may, I was amazed immediately after the election that heads of assisted secondary schools actually came out with their grievances about the implementation of free SHS. And I was wondering, so these last 8 years, where were they?
Silence.
Why didn't they come up with all these grievances? And I was reminded that if you cough, make a mistake and cough about free SHS, you are lucky if you are transferred. They were actually bullied into keeping silent over a program they were implementing. I mean, that's an aspect of the free SHS program we cannot overlook. You know, the deliberate attempt to cower people into silence. to stop a rigorous debate about the quality of the program and how to improve it and so on. It's part of that legacy that we must look at. Part of that legacy is simply the fact that in the last elections, the NPP said anybody who talks about review is talking about taboo. It became a taboo to talk about review. Now, if you have a policy which cannot be reviewed, which cannot be assessed from time to time, how can that policy be good? You understand? How can that policy be good? And you insisted it should never be reviewed. Anybody who talks about review would abandon it and so on. That's part of the mindset around the free SHS program, which has to give way. And in any case, we're talking about free SHS. And the whole rationale is to make education accessible to the less fortunate, to the less privileged, and so on. I don't have to say it. You know, everybody knows the truth. Today, still, if you go to the rural communities and so on, what passes for schools is shocking. What passes for schools is shocking. People lying on their bellies, you know, schools without teachers and so on. The misery of the students, it's mind-blowing. So there's still a lot of scope for improvement in our educational standards. Even the content of education. Even the content of education. And some of the textbooks which are being used in our schools will tend to make the students illiterate. You understand? Textbooks in our schools which glorify Dankwa and Buzia and so on, which plays down on our Republican status and so on, that's an abomination. So it's not just about making it free, it's about what you're teaching them. And history is an important subject for any country which wants to make advances. We all talk about the advances which have been made in China. China is one country which does not play with its history. Its history is part of its industrial development program. Its history is embedded in educational institutions and so on. China teaches us the value of history. This free SHS system downplays history, which is a major problem with the educational system. And I think that we need to change that curriculum. Now, besides that, and all of us know, the quality of feeding is a problem. I mean, if you're feeding students with expired food, we are killing them. We are not giving them education. It's murder, slow murder, expired products. What does that mean? So that whole arrangement ought to change. When I hear about the buffer stock company complaining about its indebtedness to suppliers of food for schools and so on, it's a dent on the educational system. I mean, the traffic light system that we introduced is not healthy for education. And we had a period where children stayed more at home than in schools because the facilities were simply not available and so on. That's worrying. That ought to change. So this whole free SHS system ought to be reviewed. Massive review of the system in order to make it, serve the purpose for which it was instituted. It's a necessity. We have to do it at any cost and every cost, with a view to improving, first and foremost, access, second, quality, and making education relevant to all aspects of the national development effort. We have to do that. It appears that not much thought went into these educational reforms. And I was amazed. I mean, look, there's one person I've come to respect so much throughout my life, because he himself has made a major contribution to Ghana's development, and he himself has been an inspiration for many of us. He taught us how to think. He taught us the importance of thinking and so on. And I'm talking about Professor Akil Akpasoya. I mean, I think on record, is the youngest vice chancellor of the University of Ghana, you know, one of the most brilliant lawyers of our days and so on, an educationist. And then Professor Kila Kwasoya came up and criticized this free SHS program and offered alternative views. My brother, come and see how these MPP communicators and serial callers descended on him and tore him apart and so on, simply for expressing his views as a citizen on this free SHS program.
Not
Now,
me.
Not you, I agree. Not you, but your people. You understand? I mean, Master, how can you have an educational policy that nobody can criticize, nobody can talk about, and come and stand in front of us in a State of the Nation address and boast about it? How is that possible? So this needs massive review, major review. It needs that. Now, one of the issues which has also come up is galamsey. And the president spoke about it. And he started talking about having put his presidency online. What? Galamsey? But you see, when people talk about galamsey, they invariably are talking about the quality of the water which flows through our taps. Most people. It is far more than that. There's medical evidence today that children in the areas most affected by galamsey, children who are being born deformed. Some of the children are being born at birth. They are blind. They can't see. Some of them have no limbs. You know, some of them suffer what you call congenital diseases. Is that how you call it?
Yeah.
Congenital diseases and so on. That is killing the future of our country. The future of our country is the babies, is the young people who are being born today, and they are being born deformed as a result of galamsey. That's a huge problem for us. You understand? The doctors are sounding the alarm bells. New diseases are coming out that the doctors cannot explain. And they think that it is connected with galamsey. We are killing our future. That is it. This year, the statistics indicate that cocoa production has actually dropped over a period by about 50%. And they say, I don't say it, but they say that cocoa is the lifeblood of the economy. Is that how you say it? The lifeblood of the economy and so on. Cocoa production is being heavily affected by galamsey. The galamseyers are buying land on which cocoa, mature cocoa, exists. They are cutting the cocoa down and doing galamsey. And for cocoa farmers who refuse to sell their products, they simply inundate your land with water and kill your cocoa trees. So the cocoa farmers are beginning to see that, well, you can't resist for too long. Just take the money and scram. And they're taking the money and scramming. And the cocoa industry is collapsing as a result of galamsey. Even the quality of the cocoa bean, for the cocoa farms that survive, the quality of the bean is being affected. Look, when I was young, one of the most pleasant things you could have were oranges from Obuasi. When you cut the orange from Obuasi open, it is yellowish, the inside. Taste, wow. Obuasi Anka, Obuasi oranges. The best you could find anywhere in the world, and so on. Today, studies reveal that the level of arsenic in Obuasi oranges is 10 times more than World Health approved standards. So this beautiful orange from Obuasi, sweet and so on, you have to be careful when you're eating it because you could die out of it. That's the effect of galamsey. That's the effect of galamsey. It is poisoning our rivers, poisoning our people, poisoning our food, leading to deformation of babies and so on. In fact, galamsey is a crime against humanity. Clear crime against humanity. And no government under whose administration galamsey develops to this extent can claim innocence. The Shamfines and the excavators and so on, they come through the harbor. They are moved on our streets to these mining areas. I mean, I used to travel to Obuasi, and every time you see these excavators and Shamfines being moved on the streets, passing police barriers, they are cleared from the ports and so on. So how can government claim innocence? How can government claim innocence? Now, when you have party bigwigs sit on television and display gold bars, we should be asking questions. They take gold bars from their side backs, say, one, this is real money. That's how they say, this is real money. You know, put one down. Say, should I bring more? Presenter says, oh yeah, bring more. They bring another one. I have even more in the other side. Then they bring it and so on. We should be asking questions. What kind of society are we building? When there is this silly, opulent, reckless display. Opulent, reckless, silly, arrogant display. Who kind of society tolerates this? And this happened in the glare of public. So how can our president come and claim that he did his best to fight it? What is doing his best? If this is his best, I'm wondering what his worst would have been. My goodness. If this is his best, what would his worst have been? You know, we don't have enough time. We can't talk about everything. And I'm happy that we can begin, you know, just simply to raise the issues in the hope that in the days ahead, there'll be a lot more discussion of these issues so that we may somehow find some solution, you know, to the problems that confront us. But you see, my own nephew, Honorable Afenyo Markin, spoke after the delivery of the State of the Nation address. And really, I was wondering, Honorable, you were in the House.
Yes.
And warning us that you will see the true nature of the NDC and so on. But we've seen the NDC before. The NDC was in power from 1992 all the way up to the year 2000. NDC came back in power 2008, 2009. We saw them. So what is it about the NDC that we haven't seen? When the people of Ghana voted on the last December 7th, they knew what they were voting for. They were clear what they were voting for. They had no illusions. So please, Honorable Afenyo Markin, please stop that. You know, it won't change anything and so on. But look, the NDC made promises in that election. And some of it featured in the State of the Nation address. I would like to warn, and I mean warn, right now, that those promises must be kept. Very serious attempts must be made to keep those promises. And you see, the leaders of the NDC, the president-elect, and the people who is going to come into office with, must understand one thing. That the people of Ghana did not vote for them because they are so handsome and exceptional and so beautiful and so on. In fact, when people were casting their ballots, they were casting it for themselves and not for external bodies. People voted because they are hungry. They want to solve their hunger. They voted for Mahama not just because Mahama is a tall, handsome man and so on. They voted for him because they live in flood-prone areas. They want to end that phenomenon where every time it rains, they have to go into asylum. They want to end that. They were voting for themselves. People voted for themselves because they cannot afford a bowl of kenke at 5 cities. So this attitude of thinking that, look, they have captured the country belongs to them as well, must end today. It must end before the NDC assumes office. The NDC must understand that power is about the people, is for the people, and must be exercised in the interest of the people. Finished. No more. And it is within this context that it is important to emphasize that the NDC must keep its promises.
Thank you for staying tuned. PENDREAM TV really appreciates your time on this channel. Once again, we urge you to share the link to your friends to also have a look or hear what is going on around the globe. Thank you.
PENDREAM TV now, so far so good. Say open online portal e Ghana. Nipa share, nipa follow, nipa comment here. To my best of knowledge, without any biases, PENDREAM TV.